Here's how I made money.
Apparently,
Here are.
my name is the tasty.
I went on a.
Hello. Today is my.
So in the show, she unalives herself.
She unalives herself.
Yeah, right after the essay.
Oh my god, did they show Nip Nop? I think that was during the Panini, you know how things were. I'm so opposite of love about that.
I opposite of love that too. She was leg booty, wasn't she?
I think she was a cornucopia phobe.
I'd unalive myself too. Herself.
Censorship has a long history of changing the way we think, speak, and write. Not only does language evolve to describe new objects and ideas as they appear, it also changes to bend around censorship from those who want to suppress it, be it the state, the church, or institutions. The most current and encompassing form of this censorship is that imposed by tech platforms, for the sake of creating the safest possible platform for advertising revenue. This censorship is not ideological in the same way North Korea punishes disloyalty with the death penalty. However, it is no less insidious. The goal of making the safest possible platform is as subjective as it is impossible. And this subjectivity has given rise to a cult of content creators who bend language in real time in order to appease their faceless algorithmic gods. This new form of language is known as Algospeak.
The corn industry of a great scenario.
In the middle of a panini.
My revenge corn story.
Great.
Porn name.
Porn. Sex.
First off, I'm gonna show you a list of words you allegedly can't say on TikTok. Subscribe to me on YouTube because the other platforms don't like me. YouTube barely likes me. My last video got shadow banned. Also, if this video hits 1K likes, I'm gonna unalive myself. Check this out, ready? So sex, it's usually spelled S-E-G-G-S. Segs for some reason. Porn is translated to corn. That's where the term revenge corn comes from, my personal favorite. Instead of kill, people say unalive. Instead of suicide, people say unalived. You can't say hate, I guess. You have to say opposite of love. Panini instead of pandemic. Nip-nops instead of nipples. Cornucopia instead of homophobia. Accountant instead of prostitute. There you go. You can't clip me. You can't clip this. I'm unclippable. But before we fully dissect Algospeak, before I give you the beans, let's look at 19th century Russia. Mikhail Saltykov-Shendrin was a Russian satirist during 19th century Russia. Now, every single literary work that got published went through the Bureau of Censorship. This was to make sure people weren't getting any big ideas from the books they were reading. Saltykov, being a satirist, he had to get around this somehow. He would write very allegorical stories that seemed like fictional fairy tales, but they were actually describing the socioeconomics of Russia at the time. Like his story, History of a City, which describes a fictional city called Fulov, full of people who are too lazy to lead themselves, so they go looking for foreign leaders because they're completely directionless. Well, it seems like fiction, but it's actually allegorical for the entirety of Russia at the time. And the specific contexts of these works are kind of like, a lot of it is lost to history, like you had to be there to really understand exactly what he meant. What's more important is the literary tool he's employing for these stories, something he calls Aesopian language. Aesop was a slave in 6th century BC Greece. He would write parables with a lot of animal characters to critique human behavior and to critique Greece without being inflammatory directly. They were just stories. Shendrin says that Aesopian language is the figurative language of slavery, at a time when literature was in a state of bondage. Aesopian language is cool because it gives us a lot of context on how language becomes subversive, how language changes context to bend around censorship in real time, the same way Algospeak does. But it's not at all analogous because saying suicide on TikTok won't land you in a prison camp. One could say that Aesopian language is pretty newbie, and it has not yet become elite. Bulletin board systems, otherwise known as BBSs, were these central servers where users would connect to them and then they could upload, download, or talk in chat rooms. This is pre-internet, so you were stuck to the BBS that you were connected to. And early computer use was heavily gatekept by the fact that you needed to know how to use a computer in the first place. So most people who used BBSs were like extremely tech savvy. And because of this, a lot of them were into hacking and cracking. These early pre-internet chat rooms is basically the birthplace of internet culture. The BBS system operators would have to create language filters so that people couldn't talk about hacking computers in the chat room. In order to combat this, BBS users would make up acronyms or change spellings of words so they could talk about what they wanted to talk about without being kicked out. This is where the term leet comes from, or noob. Hacker was spelled like this. There's also basic curse words like shit and ass. It goes a lot deeper, and like Aesopian language, some of the context is completely lost. But this is a far better example of something analogous to Algospeak, because you're not risking death by transgressing the censorship. All you're risking is getting kicked to the chat room. I guess also losing your friends, losing people you have shared interests with, not being able to talk with people online. It's not quite like the death of the self. It's more like the death of the hyperreal self. Wait. Cut the Vsauce bit. This is not happening. Okay, there's no way you actually have to say opposite of love instead of hate. There's no way you have to say cornucopia instead of homophobia. I refuse to believe this isn't written down anywhere. This isn't like a list of rules on TikTok you have to follow. This is all just made up in people's heads. We love applying this Orwellian narrative to our censorship because it's easy to imagine there is like one central power controlling everything we do and think. In actuality, there is so much information on the internet. There's no way it can all be policed. This is where Algospeak becomes superstitious. This is where it becomes like a sacrifice to a god. One can imagine a fictitious tribe that operates as if their gods are always watching their every move. They do this for fear of their gods punishing them with a crop infestation or bad weather. They even operate like this when they're alone, when no one's watching, because they believe their gods are always watching. Now imagine Sneeko streaming on Rumble, a platform that exists solely to be completely uncensored.
Regret having sex with you, so they're just gonna accuse you of rape.
Sneeko still talks in TikTok Algospeak because he knows he will be clipped and put on TikTok, and he has to act as if he's already on TikTok. We don't know how the TikTok algorithm works, the same way the tribe has no idea how nature works. And it's easier for us to make our own fake rules and follow them as if they are real. And that, ladies and gentlemen, applies to far more than just TikTok. We've created these rules and we're following them, so they might as well be real. But not real in a real sense, real in a fake real sense, real in a hyper-real sense. We live in a world with more and more information and less meaning. This is author Jean Baudrillard speaking on hyperreality in his book Simulacra and Simulation. Now, when I say that book title, some of you just rolled your eyes and some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. So rather than try to explain the whole book, I'm going to talk about one specific concept in the book, that being hyperreality. Hyperreality is the inability to distinguish between the real and the unreal. The most obvious and current example is social media. Your online self isn't your real self. It's a heavily curated, hyper-real version of yourself. Baudrillard wrote this book in 1981, during the advent of consumerism and commercialism. And he was arguing that because of advertisement, because of signs and symbols, this process had already begun. Now, in 2023, one could argue that the hyper-real self is just as important, if not more important than the real self. The version of me you're seeing on screen right now isn't me. It's the version of me that's heavily edited, lots of jump cuts, drives clicks, drives engagement, gets advertisement money for YouTube. You are living in hyperreality. If you're engaging with social media at all, you're signing an unconscious contract to place more importance on your hyperreal self than your real self. No matter how much you or I may seem like we don't care about online appearances, we still make the sacrifices necessary to maintain the hyperreal self, to play the game. That's how all games work. If you're playing soccer and all of a sudden you pick up the ball and start running around out of bounds, you're no longer playing soccer and you probably won't be invited to play again. You're either playing by the rules of social media or you're not part of the game. There is no in between. You don't risk death by firing squad by saying suicide on TikTok, but you do risk being suppressed and shadow banned. And if social media is your game, if social media is your livelihood, if social media is paramount to your career as it is for most people now, that's just as bad. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter. It now exists. And there's a generation of people growing up saying SA instead of sexual assault. There will be a point where it leaves online spaces and becomes commonplace. It will be commonplace to say unalive instead of kill. That's how language develops. That's how language changes. So from now on, when I tell you never kill yourself, I'm gonna say never commit suicide. Suicide, you can't clip that. You can't put never commit suicide on TikTok. I don't know how else to say it. Don't commit suicide. It would suck. Look at Algospeak. That's crazy, man. Algospeak is crazy. Imagine how much crazier it's gonna get. You're gonna kill yourself before Algospeak goes hog wild, and you're gonna miss that? You dumb peasant?